After an experience of nearly 40 years and having had as many as 50 regular drivers some seasons, I have never known another such an all-around rainsman as George Monroe. Just as there are the greatest soldiers and sailors, artists and mechanics at times, so there are greater stage drivers than their fellows, and George Monroe was the greatest of all. He was a wonder in every way. He had names of all his horses, and they all knew their names. Sometimes he spoke sharply to one of them, but generally he had addressed them pleasantly. He seldom or never whipped them, except to crack a whip over their heads. Metaphorically, he spoke daggers, but used none. Harry Washburn. Before there were paved roads for automobiles, traveling to and from Yosemite Valley was a difficult as well as dangerous endeavor. Narrow roads, steep grades, dangerous drop-off, and the high amounts of dust required highly skilled stage drivers. This Black History Month, I'm going to talk about the incredible story of George Monroe. George Monroe emerged as the leading and most reliable stagecoach driver at Yosemite in the late 1800s. George Monroe was born in 1847 in Georgia to a family of free Black Americans. His family moved around quite a bit, but his father, Lewis, eventually made his way to Calaveras County, California in 1852 during the gold rush. His mother, Mary, moved out there to join him as well. George Monroe lived with his uncle, George Millen, and he enrolled into a school while in Washington, D.C. Eventually, George Monroe and his uncle made their way to the West Coast to join Lewis and Mary in Mariposa, California. Mary owned a ranch on the outskirts of Mariposa, and Lewis owned a barbershop in downtown Mariposa. George Monroe becomes an adult and chooses another path. There's a boom in tourism in Yosemite Valley, and the sequoia trees of Mariposa Grove. A local businessman named Harry Washburn seized on the opportunity and started a stagecoach business for Yosemite-bound travelers. George Monroe became one of his first employees. He began driving routes between Mariposa and Yosemite Valley. As years went on, George Monroe became one known for his talents as a stagecoach driver. Stage driving is grueling work that requires attention to detail and having a rapport with the horses. The horses recognize his voice and his commands, and his reputation became renowned. Some of his famous passengers are President Ulysses S. Grant, President Rutherford B. Hayes, President James A. Garfield, as well as royalty, politicians, and famous artists. One travel journalist remarked on George's demeanor. His gentleness and kindness were only exceeded by his skill, of which soon became both proud and grateful. George Monroe tragically passed away on November 22nd, 1886, at the young age of 39, after being seriously injured during a mule ride. George Monroe didn't see the official establishing of Yosemite National Park, but there are two locations named in his honor, and that is Monroe Meadows and Fort Monroe. George Monroe's incredible story happened during slavery, even though his family was free, and during the Civil War, and during Reconstruction, and also during Jim Crow, even though Jim Crow wasn't a law in California, but it was custom around the rest of the country. His incredible rise to the top of his profession, even though it was a dangerous and demanding job, is truly remarkable.